Juliet thought her life was perfect. She had everything a woman could ask for: a loving husband, 2 beautiful children, a comfortable home, and a future that seemed limitless. They weren't rich, but they had enough. Her father had given her husband, Mark, a stable job, one that ensured security for their family and kept them grounded in the life they'd built together. They weren't flashy or extravagant, but they had each other, and that was all Juliet needed to feel fulfilled. Their marriage had been solidly built on trust, love, mutual respect. They were the couple everyone admired. Friends called them the perfect pair. People would comment on how blessed they were to have found each other, to have such a strong, supportive bond. It wasn't without its challenges, of course, but what marriage was. Juliet felt at peace with her life, knowing that no matter what happened, they had each other to rely on. Or so she thought. That all changed one evening when Juliet found something she wasn't supposed to. It wasn't a text or a phone call or a grand gesture of betrayal. It wasn't even a conversation she overheard. It was a single, small object. A piece of black jewelry and a woman's bracelet found tucked away in the inner pocket of Mark's jacket. It was the kind of item that, under ordinary circumstances, would never raise an eyebrow. But Juliet felt the ground beneath her tremble as her fingers closed around it. It was beautiful, too beautiful to belong to her, and certainly not something she had ever seen on herself or their daughters. As she held it, her mind went into overdrive. The life she thought she knew, the love she had carefully nurtured for years, suddenly felt fragile, like a glass ornament teetering on the edge of a shelf. Juliet sat in stunned silence, the bracelet pressing coldly into her palm. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of her life with Mark, trying to make sense of what she was holding. She examined its design, its delicate craftsmanship, and tried to convince herself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was a gift for a friend, maybe it was something he had picked up on a business trip. There had to be an explanation. But even as she thought that, a gut feeling began to gnaw at her, a feeling that grew stronger with each passing second. She couldn't ignore it. Her intuition, honed over years of shared experiences and subtle moments, told her this was no random object. This was a clue that something was terribly wrong. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty. She didn't want to confront Mark immediately. She didn't want to accuse him of something she wasn't sure about. But as she continued to think about the bracelet, the odd behavior started to add up. Mark had been coming home late more often, his phone seemed to be glued to him, and he had become more secretive and distant. The easy flow of conversation between them had been replaced by silence or awkward small talk. Juliet noticed that his usual warmth and attentiveness had been replaced by a coldness she couldn't explain. And yet, she tried to tell herself that she was being paranoid, that this wasn't anything she should read too much into. But the bracelet kept her up at night. She couldn't let go of it, couldn't dismiss the feeling that Mark was hiding something from her. Something important. Days turned into weeks, and Juliet's suspicions grew. She couldn't stop herself from investigating further. She rifled through Mark's jacket pockets again, this time with a deliberate hand. The bracelet was still there, and that only deepened her fear. She checked his phone, his messages, his social media, and his contacts, but nothing stood out. He was careful. Too careful. But Juliet was determined. She knew something wasn't right, and she wasn't going to let it go until she uncovered the truth. It wasn't until she overheard a private phone conversation late one evening that everything came crashing down. Mark was on the phone in the other room. He was speaking softly, his words tinged with affection, words Juliet didn't recognize. "Baby, I can't wait to see you again. I miss you. I've been thinking about you all day," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Juliet's heart froze in her chest. Her body went numb. She had never heard Mark speak like that before, certainly not to her. The cold, hard reality of it hit her all at once. He wasn't just being secretive, he was hiding an affair. Her world came crashing down. It wasn't a suspicion anymore, it was a fact. She had been living in a lie for months, perhaps even years. Her mind reeled, but her heart was already breaking. The man she had trusted with everything, her love, her future, her family, was lying to her. The confrontation was inevitable. Juliet could feel it building inside her, a tension that could no longer be ignored. She wasn't sure what she was looking for: an explanation, an apology, or maybe just the truth. But when Mark came home that evening, she didn't wait for him to settle in. She couldn't. She had reached the point where silence could no longer shield her from the reality she was living in. She took a deep breath, holding the bracelet in her hand like the evidence it was. "Mark," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain, "who is she? Who is the woman you've been seeing?" Mark froze, his face going pale. The mask he had worn so carefully for months began to slip. He looked at her for a long moment, searching for words, but none came. His eyes shifted away, unable to meet hers. Juliet pressed him, her voice stronger now, cutting through the thick silence. "Tell me the truth, Mark. I deserve to know. Is this what you've been hiding? Is this why everything's been so different?" Mark's lips trembled and his eyes filled with shame. "Juliet, I never meant for it to happen like this," he stammered. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. But I've been seeing someone. It wasn't planned, but it happened. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way." The words felt like a slap. Juliet couldn't breathe. The betrayal was no longer a distant fear, it was right in front of her, raw and painful. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead she sat down, holding herself together as best she could. She looked at him, her voice a whisper. "How could you? After everything we've been through, after everything we built?" Mark couldn't answer. There was nothing left to say. All Juliet could hear now were the echoes of the love they had shared, now tainted by lies. It wasn't just the affair that hurt, it was the realization that their entire marriage had been based on illusions, on a false sense of security. In the days that followed, Juliet was forced to confront the wreckage of her life. She knew she could never go back to the way things were. The perfect life she had worked so hard to build had been shattered, and she was left to pick up the pieces. But as the initial pain began to subside, a new strength began to rise within her. The betrayal had shaken her to the core, but it had also opened her eyes to a truth she had been avoiding. Her worth was not tied to Mark or to any man. It was not defined by her marriage or the approval of others. Juliet realized she didn't need anyone to validate her. She could stand on her own. The hardest part wasn't facing the betrayal, it was the decision she had to make. Should she stay in a marriage built on lies? Should she forgive and move on, or should she walk away from a life that no longer felt true? Ultimately, Juliet chose herself. She chose to rebuild, to find strength in her own truth. She let go of the past and stepped into a future she could create on her own terms. And the lesson she learned was this: when the illusion of perfection fades, what remains is your truth. Betrayal may break you, but it also gives you the chance to rebuild yourself from the ground up. No one has the power to define your worth, not even the ones you love. This is Juliet's story, a story of heartbreak, of reclaiming strength, and of finding her truth in the midst of a broken heart. A story of learning that no matter how shattered your life feels, you always have the power to rise again. If you find this story interesting, please subscribe to this channel for more revealing stories.